All right, we've got some exciting trains from Moloko in the mail today, so let's open this box. Ooh. In an urban era here with a new kind of unboxing video, but also a quick history of boxcar detail technology and all of that through the years of model railroading. But first, let's start with the new stuff. So let's start with the new trio of Moloko boxcars. We have in order a Topeka Shops FE34 double door 50-footer. We have a Topeka Shops BX94 single door insulated. And we have a Topeka Shops BX97 insulated 50-footer. Moloko has been producing boxcars for just a few years, but they've been knocking it out of the park with detail and their prototypical accuracy. Let's take a look at all three of these up close and see what makes them stand out. Okay, up first is this FE34 double-door boxcar. One of the most remarkable things about it is actually this lovely galvanized steel roof. And a lot of model manufacturers paint silver roofs, but this is really remarkable in the fact that it actually looks like galvanized steel, matching the prototype, including very unique-looking roof walk, too, which I'm sure is prototypically accurate. On the side of the car, of course, you have the beautiful Super Shock Control slogan and all of the requisite car data, which is really neat. Apparently he went through great pains to get all of this correct, both in typeface and information. And of course, another lovely example of a circle cross car. Underneath, you have these remarkably beautiful, highly detailed trucks. You can see there's no big old screw in the bottom of it, which is kind of nice to see, and additional full brake rigging without making it delicate. Like, it's fairly tough. All the trucks are the correct width, and they look like cast steel, which is quite nice, and they're new machined metal wheels. There also appears to be a cushioned underframe, which is rather nice with all of the Super Shock cushion equipment here you can see in this glint, which is rather beautifully done. You can see all the brake rigging, of course, is all in there as well, which is really neat, including these incredibly fine coupler lift bars here, which I really hope stay on the car in normal use. One thing I've been noticing, and I'm very happy with a lot of more modern models, is that they're including the air hose. So when I snip the Kadee trip pin off, because I don't use them in the operation of my model railroad, it will look even finer as a model. And so that's the first of three. Let's look at the next car. All right, up next we've got our BX94. This is I believe, an XMLI insulated car, which is really nice. It's so nice to see all of these 1960s prototypes that have never, ever been produced before made today, and even better that it's done at such a high quality. And we can see it has a completely prototypically correct to this car underframe as well, which is nice. No fudging of older offerings where you have, you know, the rudimentary same underframe on all 50-foot, all 40-foot cars like you used to get 20 years ago. One of the coolest things about it is it has an offset door for loading. So look at it here. So I'm going to put my finger in the center of this door. Look at this. It's offset a little bit, which is really neat, and allows forklifts to more efficiently load and unload the boxcar depending on where it is, which is rather cool. Have the same beautiful galvanized steel roof. You can notice that you've got a different roof walk design here, which is really cool. All of the ends have beautifully correct lettering, which is really remarkable. And of course, extremely fine but tough ladders on the ends, which is nice. It's refreshing, especially after the early 2000s, like proto stuff, where they'd have all the super fragile stuff that would just break the second you touch it. And you have these beautiful roller bearing trucks as well. So let's move on to the next one. So we're talking about door tracks, and I think it's important to see exactly what I mean. So this is a car tooled in the late 60s, early 70s. Not a car from the late 60s, early 70s like this one. But this is actually representative of a decades-old tooling process that has continued into the modern era as the Bachmann silver line. So let's see just a basic comparison. Now, keep in mind this car is about $50, but the MSRP for this one is $40-something now, which is something to consider when you're looking at it. Now, the one modification I did to this car is I added Kadee metal wheels to it. It came with machine-turned Bachmann metal wheels, which are just fine, but I needed them for another project. So just keep that in mind as I go around the car. Okay, so we can look, obviously, you see the battleship large rivets that, let's talk about the limitations of machine tooling at the time. This is CNC milled. All the tooling for this is CNC milled. It was all done in like a SolidWorks or a AutoCAD Inventor style 3D program and revised all the time. This was drafted on paper, and then the masters were machined by hand by a tooler with a Bridgeport milling machine decades ago. And, we may see these as battleship rivets today, but back in the day, these were pretty cutting edge. You had these tiny, imagine doing that on a lathe. Imagine making the master for this and putting in what must be, well over a couple hundred, divots with a milling machine to make this master. Even though the model itself can be considered crude by 2020 standards, it was quite pushing some boundaries back in the day. And that's something to be respected, even if it may not be shall we say, a contemporary model that we might want to have next to our Accurail's Moloko boxcars. Now, one of the things of that era was everybody wanted some action to their cars, and much like the Atherton Blue Box, you have operable side doors, which is kind of fun. We'll look into other manufacturers that managed to do that more prototypically later, but you can see the play value of that as a toy is fantastic. You can leave them open as if they were empty, or close them up if they were a loaded boxcar, or do the halfway kind of FRA violation of it's a loaded car, but the door is slid open somehow. Moving around the car, one of the shortfalls you have is the roof walk is not painted the body color or the roof color. Now, of course, the painting and decoration of these older cars is nowhere near as fine. They didn't reach out to historical societies. They just did what was colorful. Although a State of Maine Products boxcar does exist in real life, it's actually not a 40-foot slidey door boxcar. It is an insulated 40-foot car, of which Eastern Scale Models is about to come out with a completely correct version of this car. Moving around, we have cast-on ladders. And a lot of people are like, oh God, cast-on ladders. In a lot of cases, having them is great for operations. They won't fall off. And until recently, with like these offers from Moloko and Accurail, they used to be very brittle and very dangerous, and they would fly off at a moment's notice. Now, looking on the underframe, you can see much in the same way that a lot of contemporaries, Atherton, Tyco, all of that, of the era, just made one tooling of this. Like, this is very similar to the Revell tooling for their 40-foot boxcar made back in the mid-1950s. You can kind of see suggestions of a proper AB brake system here. You can see the individual boards is a nice touch. It adds a little extra to it, but it's not really anything to write home about. The nice thing is that you can handle the model, though. You can touch it. You can slam it. It's made for kids, and that's something to keep in mind. Like, you don't want to give a 9-year-old one of these. So, these boxcars will always have a place in modeling history and, in our hearts in a way, even if it may not be something contemporary. Moving on to the next category, I would say in the 1980s, Accurail, or the early 90s, Accurail came out with these exquisite shake the box kits. Now, just like the earlier Bachmann one or the Atherton Blue Box ones, although the Bachmann one did come assembled, the Atherton Blue Box obviously was a kit. So they took the model of the Atherton Blue Box kit and they updated it for the 80s and 90s, which is really remarkable. All the tooling on all the Accurail stuff is exquisite. While there isn't any individual wiring and brake rigging between it's not really necessary for this. You can see the absolute high-end detail of the underframe would be good enough to spend time upgrading it. Now with this model, you wouldn't bother super detailing this unless you were desperate. But this one, you could take the time to upgrade. And in this case, I have. I removed the cast-on grab irons with metal grab irons. It took about 20 minutes, and it's drastically improved the look of the car. You know, these ladders are fine enough that I'll just keep them on. I don't need to shave these. They look great as is. Just a little black wash in the shadows to make it pop a little bit from the car body. You can go into the roof. This is an accurate roof for this. You can even see, if you look really closely, these beautiful stamped ends here that add a little bit of strength and match the prototype, and a wooden running board to match this car. The ends, the dreadnought ends on this are perfectly accurate. I mean, Accurail does live up to its name, and they are probably my favorite off-the-shelf, inexpensive freight car trucks for projects. This is a good all-rounder, and you can have these for about $10. Up the design ladder here is an Atlas 1932 ARA boxcar, and this one is approaching the level of this, which is really nice. This is a post-2000s tooling that came out a few years ago, and it has a great, well-detailed underframe, excellent trucks that roll really well. I retrofitted mine with Kadee couplers. This one actually has separately applied handrails and ladders, which already puts it well in the ballpark, and a beautiful steel roof. You can see where we're going here. We're going towards more and more detail, more quality. You know, that ARA boxcar I think is about $25. Now, here's a Kadee boxcar, you know, long considered the gold standard of what a boxcar should be. They offered them in a billion different variations, which was wonderful, but here you go. Just like that old Bachmann or Athearn Blue boxcar, you have operable doors, but look at how smooth these are, right? Kadee spent that extra time to make that playability work, and I appreciate that. The door tracks are realistic, all the lettering is proper, all the underframe is one of the highest detailed, and puts these, you know, very much in the same category as far as detail and prototype fidelity, which is great. I think Kadee makes a gold standard boxcar, not to mention that the interiors are also detailed. You can see there's individual board lines inside the freight car deck, and separately applied grab irons and ladders. And you can see they took the time to get all of the colors right, with black ends, boxcar red sides, and a galvanized steel roof. You know, these are $25 to $30, but they're worth every penny if they match your prototype era. The only consternation I have with Kadee is that they shoot, sometimes they just cast the model in the color of the plastic, and they just pad print right on the plastic. Now, that's fine because you can take a little bit of tester's dull coat, and then it immediately looks like paint after you're done. But it does require a little bit of prep. Now, remember earlier I said that this one basically doesn't require any. So keep that in mind. You know, the underframe is shiny engineering plastic. That'll have to be dulled or painted. And it's just a wonderful invitation for weathering. That's not a bad thing. But just keep that in mind. Now you're like, okay, you showed me a bunch of 40-foot boxcars, but those things are 50-foot and they aren't even Santa Fe. What are you doing, Miles? So here, this is an example of, I think, a mid-'80s Walthers car that has been redone as a Gold Line car with more accurate painting and detailing. The tooling goes back to the mid-1980s, but we can see where we're at here. Now let's look at color and prototype fidelity when it comes to lettering. You know, the scales, of course, are different on these cars. That is the way that they probably were prototypically. But if you look closely at the typefaces and the fidelity to that, you can see that it's pretty good, honestly. But you can also see the subtle differences therein. Notice that this is also cast in red plastic, and then these bits are painted. So you can see that even though it's been hit with some flat coat, it still does not have that perfect steel look to it. You can see that the Santa Fe red on the Moloko car is dead on, and this one is just a red. You know, it's something to keep in mind. Now, are both of these cars going to enter daily service on my layout? Yes, they're both excellent cars, and they have a proper spot on the layout. You know, looking at the roof, pretty nice detail. You know, simple but good. The underbody detail, of course, is very much of the Athearn Blue Box or Accurail variety, where you can kind of sort of see there's a brake system suggestion here with the cylinders and whatnot, but that's really it. You don't have any of the piping or any of the finer stuff. You can see that this is a cushion underframe car, but it does not have a cushion underframe. If it did, it would have all of this detail here and all the detail on the coupler boxes as well, but it's missing. So keep that in mind. You know, you won't have these cars upside down much, or at least I hope you won't, but it's just something to keep in mind. These are the details that really set the cars apart. The Walthers ones aren't cheap either. I think they're in the mid $30 range. So if you keep that in mind, that's as much or more than some of the Kadee cars that you can find online. But the nice thing about Walthers is sometimes they choose prototypes that you can't find anywhere else. So you'll be careful to purchase exactly the right ones you need for the layout concept you're after. But, you know, this one comes, because it's a gold line, it comes with, you know, metal wheels and knuckle-style couplers. Eventually I'll have to replace these with Kadees because the McHenrys are awful. But you can see where the price difference is, where the quality difference is, and how far, through all of those boxcars, how far we've come in tooling and technology and research and prototype fidelity. And this represents decades of work to get to here. So keep that in mind. Whenever you see a more expensive boxcar, and you might poo-poo it because it might be expensive, remember that it is also time and effort saved on your end, and that these things have a deep value to them. Not to mention that people manage to snap these up pretty quickly, and they seem to be remarkably collectible, so you really have to stay on it. Like the Accurail cars I reviewed earlier in another video, you have to ask yourself, what are the freight car models I'm purchasing for? Are they for operations? Are they for photography and weathering? Or are they to give to a kid to make a lifetime's worth of memories? Once you find that out, you'll find the right piece of rolling stock that's right for you.